Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu News Analysis by BAJIRAO IAS Academy. So today is 2nd May 2024 and we have few important and relevant news article for today's discussion. So let's try to discuss them. Before discussing them, try to solve this prelims practice question. World Coral Conservation Project is an initiative of which of the following agencies? So the options given here are A. United Nations Environment Program, B. IUCN, C. Worldwide Fund for Nature, and D. None of the above. See, the correct answer for this question is none of the above. So we'll just look at the solution here. The self-bred corals from the World Coral Conservatory Project has actually been added to Europe's largest reef at Burgers Zoo in Netherlands. And in fact, the self-bred corals are actually offering a hope amid the declining coral populations worldwide. And in fact, we all knew that increasing sea surface temperatures have been making the existing coral reefs more and more vulnerable to the increasing temperatures. So thereby it has been leading to the large scale mortality of the corals, or it is also known as coral bleaching. We all knew that the coral reefs are known to host the highest levels of biodiversity in a marine or aquatic ecosystems. So therefore, in order to sustain the marine food chain and ensure the stable and sustainable populations of aquatic organisms, it is very important that we must conserve the coral reefs and we must protect them from the coral bleaching. However, the global warming and climate change have been increasing the sea surface temperatures, and in fact we all knew that the coral reefs are actually sensitive to the higher temperatures that could lead to the large scale coral bleaching. However, in the present times, protecting corals is a very significant. So in this context, we'll understand recently the 26th World Energy Congress, so that was co-hosted by World Energy Council, was recently concluded in Rotterdam, Netherlands. Now understand World Coral Conservatory Project. So this Coral Conservatory project was initiated in Monaco in 2019, and this coral conservation project aims to safeguard a diverse collection of the coral species, the coral reefs and different species of coral reefs and the aquatic organisms which are found in these coral reefs, by cultivating samples which are taken from the natural environment, thereby making positive efforts to conserve and sustain existing coral species and coral populations. And in fact, this particular World Coral Conservatory Project is partnering with public and private aquariums, and this particular project also seeks to preserve living colonies of corals and share them for the conservation efforts. And in fact, if you can look at the presence of coral reefs in India, coral reefs are present in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Lakshadweep Islands, Gulf of Mannar between India and Sri Lanka, and Rann of Kutch. So we can see the presence of coral reefs in India. Please remember this because it is important. UPSC has asked a previous question on this. So today's practice question, so we have already discussed this in our previous lectures. Consider the following statements about the Nilgiri tar. First statement, it is listed as endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. It is endemic to the Eastern Ghats. And third statement, it is the state animal of Kerala. So which of the following statements given above are correct? So please answer this question. So try to participate in this. Try to answer this question because gradually it improves your ability to further enhance your accuracy in your prelims examination. Okay, so the correct answer I'll be giving you in tomorrow's lecture, and we'll briefly discuss few important news articles that are covered in the Hindu newspaper today. So the first important news article, it is about ISRO finding a proof of enhanced possibility of water ice in polar craters of the moon. Now this is all about finding out evidence of existence of ice in the watery ice in the moon's surface. So we all knew that India earlier launched Chandrayaan 1, Chandrayaan 2 and Chandrayaan 3. So one of the significant objective of sending Chandrayaan 3 and all Chandrayaan series missions into the moon's surface to find out the evidence of existence of water on the surface of the moon. And in fact, India is one of the country which has revealed about the traces of presence of water on the moon's surface. And in fact, if we can find out water on the moon's surface, what is the significance of water and why every country is a very focused or very determined to find out water content on the moon's surface. So because in future we may have human colonies on the moon's surface. So this human colonies will be established at a sources where we have a ice or watery ice. And secondly, the water on the moon surface would also help us make rocket fuel, so that will help us in future space missions. And in fact, we wanted to use moon for launching interplanetary missions into far off places. So therefore, in all these respects, moon in fact plays a very important role, and finding out the evidence of water will also help us achieve a greater milestone in the human history with respect to the interplanetary missions. Now the context is that recently ISRO scientists, Indian Space Research Organization scientists, have found out the evidence of the enhanced possibility of water ice that is occurred in the polar craters of the moon. See, Chandrayaan 3 was launched by ISRO and it was successfully landed on the moon's surface on August 23. So in fact, the Chandrayaan 3 was landed on the southern pole of moon. It is completely under darkness, and Chandrayaan 3 also finds out important evidence with respect to existence of water on the moon's surface. And this study was done by scientists of ISRO Space Applications Center. So ISRO Space Application Center's scientists have done this study with respect to finding out evidence of ice or water on the surface of the moon. And in fact, if you look at the presence of subsurface ice in the first couple of meters, it is 5 to 8 times higher than or larger than the water that is present on the surface of both the poles. So these are both the poles of the moon. However, the subsurface, so this is surface and below the surface there will be subsurface, and this subsurface of the moon, moon's crust actually have up to 5 to 6 meters. There are 5 to 8 times larger water content on the moon's subsurface. And apart from that, if we can drill on the moon's surface, that has already been done by Chandrayaan 3. So if we can drill on the moons to collect sample and excavate that ice, and that will be primordial for future missions and long-term human presence. So because we wanted to establish human settlements on the moon's surface in the future, and water plays one of the most important and most crucial role, and at the same time we also wanted to launch our future space missions from the surface of the moon. So all these factors will significantly benefited from the availability of water on the moon's surface, and that is the significance of availability of ice or water on the moon surface. And in fact, the extent of the presence of water ice on the northern pole of the moon's surface is actually twice or greater than the presence of water ice in the southern pole region. So these are some of the observations with respect to the availability of the water on the lunar surface. And in fact, the hypothesis is that the primary source of this subsurface water ice in the lunar poles is actually a method or a process called outgassing. So that took place, or that is as a result of volcanism in the Lambrian period. So due to volcanism, outgassing, so all the gases inside the surface would be released due to the volcanism, and this outgassing is actually responsible for the source of subsurface water ice on the lunar surface. And in fact, if we can talk about this Lambrian period, so in the lunar geological time scale, early Lambrian epoch occurred from 3850 million years ago to about 3800 million years ago. Okay, so that is with respect to the availability of the that is with respect to availability of the water on the lunar surface. And in fact, the knowledge of the distribution and depth of, so how the water is being distributed across the lunar surface, and apart from that, the depth of the water that is being present in the lunar surface or lunar poles is very, very important, or it is crucial for constraining the uncertainties in selecting the future landing and at the same time sampling sites. So for example, imagine that in this particular place there is an availability of water, so we can plan the future landing on this particular site to extract the available water resources, and at the same time sampling sites for missions that are aimed at exploring, characterizing the lunar volatiles. And this study also very, very important for supporting ISRO's future in situ exploration plans on the moon. So we will not just stop with Chandrayaan 3, rather we have several other missions planning to the lunar surface. In fact, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also announced that Indian Vyomanauts would be launched into the surface of the moon by early 2040s. So therefore, all these observations or the findings of the study are very important from the perspective of India's space program. So the next important news article is that India is one of the key geographies which are being affected by phishing attacks. Okay, so phishing is a type of a cyber crime, and that has a huge implications on the personal privacy and even the finances of the people. Now first we'll try to understand what exactly is the meaning of phishing. So when a hacker launches a phishing attack, he or she trying to trick you into believing that the message is from a legitimate source, so that you will click on the link and download the attachment. For example, to your mail, or you get a message. Okay, so you get a message and that message appears legitimate message, and you received a message from an authentic source, and that is how you are actually tricked into. And then you open the mail and click on the link that is provided on that mail. So when you click on the mail that is being provided on that email or message, your information will be taken control by the hacker. So your personal information and your financial information, so all those details would be taken control by the hackers, and that is what is known as phishing. And in fact, India is one of the most vulnerable countries to this particular cyber hack. So why? Because if you look at India, so the information and communication technology has been growing at a tremendous pace, and we have also undertaken certain digitization or digitalization measures throughout the country. So all these factors have been making India one of the potential hotspot of phishing or any other cyber crime. So in fact, if you look at the institutional framework that is available to deal with phishing related incidents, so we do not have any specific legal framework. So we have no such legislation which could specially deals with these cyber crimes. And at the same time, the institutional architecture is also inefficient and ineffective to deal with such large scale phishing incidents, and all these factors have been making India more and more vulnerable to the increased attempts of phishing or cybercrime. So when employees of any company click on malicious links or attachments that appear that they come from the legitimate sources, and it is often leading to the severe financial losses to that particular company. And in fact, India is one such country which is highly vulnerable to this phishing cybercrime. And in fact, India is concerned, if you talk about India, the reporting practices of phishing are actually improved compared to the previous data. So compared to the previous year data, the reporting practices have significantly increased, with 20% of the users are now identifying and reporting the phishing during the simulation tests. So it is very good that they are able to differentiate between what is an authentic and a legitimate message and what is a message which is a potentially a phishing message. Okay, so therefore identifying such messages in fact reduces the vulnerability. However, this was only the first stepping stone. So employees and the citizens able to identify these messages as a potential cybercrime. So this is first stepping stone, because as enterprises can significantly reduce the human error in cybersecurity by adopting a multi-pronged approach. And adoption of this multi-pronged approach by the companies is very important, because that could reduce the human error in the cybersecurity angle. And in fact, if you look at espionage attacks, so espionage attacks are also part of the cyber crime. So these espionage attacks are actually dominating the Asia Pacific region compared to the cybersecurity or in the cybersecurity landscape, including India. Now take all the cybersecurity landscape into account, and in that particular cybersecurity account in the Asia Pacific region, espionage attacks are actually a dominant factor. And according to some data, 25% of the Asia Pacific regions cyber attacks are motivated by this espionage. So espionage is accessing information through illicit means, regular surveillance. So that is known as espionage. And 25% of all the cases in Asia Pacific region are actually involves this element of espionage, and that significantly greater than 6% and 4% in Europe and North America. Okay, so therefore Asia Pacific region is highly vulnerable to this particular espionage and other cyber crimes. And if you look at the data, the espionage incidents or overall cybercrime incidents are actually increased by around 180%. Okay, so vulnerability exploitation. So there is a 180% growth in the vulnerability exploitation by the fraudulent elements. Now here there is a 5-point guide to phishing attack prevention. So how can we prevent this phishing attack? Now it is very important that you have understood what is phishing, because it not just impacts the companies, it will also impact the normal citizens, and there are a lot of people who are vulnerable or who already faced this phishing attack from this cybercrime agents. So firstly, question sender's identity and urgent requests, and secondly, check the authenticity of the link that you have received. So it is very important, and if you don't check the authenticity of the link, and you will be made or you will be then became vulnerable to this phishing. And after that, refuse to share the passwords, card details, OTPs and pins, and report any suspicious emails, fake callers, fraudulent transactions immediately, because that could significantly help government keep a tab on these phishing incidents, and can also identify the potential hotspots and take concerted efforts to prevent such attempts. And then protect yourself via wallet protect or any other two-factor authentication. That UPI is an example. UPI has a two-factor authentication in a similar sense, so you can also protect yourself from this phishing activities. Now after that, there is another important news article. So we have been regularly discussing about this inequality in India. See, inequality in India is a major concern, so there is no such doubt about that. So because the data and the statistics have been revealing us that the inequalities have been soaring to a new heights in India. And in fact, these inequalities have been a detrimental factor in reducing the opportunities for the weaker sections of the society or marginalized sections of the society, and that it is the responsibility of the government to reduce the concentration of wealth, and that is one of the primary objective of any welfare state. And in fact, yesterday also we have discussed Article 39 of the Indian Constitution that deals with the directive principles of state policy. So in this editorial, the author has been discussing about the inequalities and what are the major reasons for inequalities and how we can deal with the existing inequalities so that we can create an egalitarian society in India. And that is very important, because when we have created an equitable society, so that provides equal opportunities for every section of the society and every individual, and that is where we can further build our inclusive development. Now what is the context? So the context is that recently a report called Income and Wealth Inequality in India 1922 to 2023. So this was the report, and that has all the details of how inequalities have gradually increased in India from 1922 to 2023. So this particular report has been talking about there is a significant rise in number of billionaires, and they called it as billionaire Raj. So because there is a number of billionaires in India, and those billionaires are actually controlling the wealth, income, resources of a country, and even they are controlling the government also. So because of that reason, the author used the billionaire Raj in India. Okay, so in fact, Thomas Piketty, so one of the authors and who mostly deals with the inequality, and his co-authors estimate that, so they have estimated that inequality in India today is far worse than during the interwar British colonial period. So interwar British colonial period in the sense that the time between First World War and Second World War is known as the interwar period, and the authors have been talking about the inequalities in India. So inequalities now in India are higher than what we have during the interwar period and even during the British colonial rule. So understand some statistics with respect to the existing inequalities in India. In 2022, top 1% wealthy populations of our country actually owned 40.1% of the total national wealth. So this 40.1% of the total national wealth is actually owned by just 1% of the wealthy populations. And in fact, they have also earned 22.6% of the total national income. And on the other hand, so if you look at the population pyramid, so this is top 1% and it is bottom 50% of the population. So this bottom 50% of the population, they actually own just 6.4% of the total wealth, compared to just 1% wealthy, they own around 40.1% of the national wealth. And at the same time, the bottom 50% have also earned just 15% of the total income. So this has been indicating that we have a stark inequalities in our country, and it is an urgent necessity to address these stark inequalities or concentration of the wealth. And if you can look at India's taxation system or India's tax system, so it is said that India's tax system is a regressive in nature. Okay, so it is a regressive taxation, and at the same time the tax to GDP ratio in India is also very less. So the tax to GDP ratio in India is also very less, and we have the regressive taxation system. So what is a regressive taxation system? So the pie of the taxation. So if you look at, this is the pie of the taxation, and the majority of the taxes would be paid by the, or the majority of the taxes are paid by the bottom 50% or the common people instead of the wealthy populations. So that is known as a regressive taxation. But on the other hand, there is another type of a taxation, and that is known as progressive taxation. So this progressive taxation actually means that, so you are taxing the rich according to their wealth. Okay, so if there are higher incomes for an individual, you will be taxing at a higher rate. So that is progressive taxation. But in India, we see the regressive form of taxation. Okay, so that is regressive taxation. Now briefly understand the definition of regressive taxation also. So low income individuals are actually paying a higher percentage of their income as taxes than the high income individuals. For example, imagine an individual who is earning just 25,000 rupees, and this low income earning individual has been paying the higher amount of taxes. Okay, so in this tax pie, most of the taxes are being paid by the bottom 50% or 60% of the population instead of the wealthy population, even though most of the wealth is concentrated among these wealthy individuals. So that is known as regressive taxation. So income and wealth inequalities in India began to rise sharply from 1980s when India started to adopt the market reforms. So we all knew that India adopted the LPG reforms in 1991. So before also, from 1980s also, we have gradually started the market reforms. So from 1980s onwards, the income and wealth inequalities in India began to rise sharply from 1980s because of the market reforms. So one such example was the share of bottom 50% in the total national income dropped from 23.6% in 1982 to just 15% in 2022. While on the other hand, the income share of top 10% rose from 30% in 1982 to 57.7% during the very same period, and that has been indicating a rise in the stark inequalities in India. And in fact, so if you look at the economic growth and the pattern of economic growth in India, that was a stagnant until 1990s. Because why it was stagnant? Because we have followed the socialist model of governance. Okay, so because of that reason, it is said that India's economic growth was stagnant before 1990s, but we have seen the rise in economic growth after 1990s because we started to adopt the LPG reforms, and that have significantly helped us see the higher levels of growth rate. And in fact, India's economy has also grown at a miserable 1.6% per year during the stagnant phase of 1960s to 1990s because of the socialist policies that the government has adopted. Now, what does the socialist policies here? So for example, market licensing or industrial licensing or licensing Raj, and restrictions on foreign direct investment, and at the same time government directly controlling the industries and markets. All these factors come under the socialist policies of the government, and those socialist policies of the government are actually responsible for the stagnant growth of 1.6% during 1960s to 1990s. So the size of India's total economic pie has actually grown much in the last 30 years after the LPG reforms. that even the bottom 50% now enjoy a higher real income despite receiving a much lower share of their national income. So this essentially means that the LPG reforms, even though they have contributed for the concentration of wealth in the hands of few individuals, but it has increased the real income of the poor, the bottom 50%. And trend in income shares of different groups since 1980s are actually showing that the bottom 50% does not actually enjoy as much economic freedom as top 1% or even top 10% of the populations. So in this context, the extreme wealth disparity is largely, there are wealth disparities. Few people have been earning more and few people have been earning less, and a few people have more wealth. Okay, so this is a wealth disparity is largely not because of the free market rewarding top 1% of their entrepreneurial capabilities. So rather it is because a top 1% have been enjoying certain government privileges, and those privileges have been making them enjoy a significant amount of the national wealth and national wealth, because these government privileges have been protecting the top 1% or top 10% plutocracy in India. So plutocracy were the wealthy. So top 1% plutocracy is protected from the competition in the marketplace. So this protection could erode their wealth significantly. Okay, so they are enjoying the government privileges, and this government privileges which actually protects them from the competition in the marketplace, and that could erode the wealth share significantly. So a way forward then is to get rid of such special privileges and allow more competition in the economy. So that is very, very important here. So this would naturally reduce the wealth share of the top 1% populations, and it would also benefit the wider economy, since competition ensures that the best investors rise to the top and wealth hierarchy and enlarges the size of economic pie in this process also. And in fact, contrary to the common belief that investors can actually shield themselves from the higher taxes, so including wealth tax, so by lowering the amount of capital that they invest in any venture based on their expected post tax income. See, this essentially means that imagine that a wealthy individual who is an investor, and if government comes up with the progressive taxation that if you invest higher amounts of money, you will be charged a higher tax rate. So then what this investor will do? Investor will significantly reduce the amount of capital that he will invest, because now he will be reducing his tax burden by reducing the amount of capital that he is investing in the economy. Now if he reduces the amount of capital that is being invested, what happens? So the bottom 50% or bottom 60% of the population, mostly they are middle income groups, and they significantly dependent on the capital that is being invested by the wealthy and top 1% or 10% of the populations. So therefore their incomes are directly related with the capital that is being invested by the top 1% or 10% of the population. So therefore if we charge a wealth tax, or if we progressively tax the wealthy individuals, so that could significantly impact the facilitation of formation of investment or capital in the economy, and that could impact the lives of bottom 50% or 60% of the population. So therefore what we have to do, so wealth that top 1% possess in the form of capital assets such as advanced factories, real estate, and they are not consumer goods or services. Okay, so if we tax the wealthy, higher amounts of taxes being imposed on these wealthy sections, so what they will do, so they will start reducing their capital investment in the economy. So that will significantly impact the economic growth and development potential. However, the wealth tax will have a negative effect on the economic growth and living standards of the people. Now, in this context, the right way through which we can fight the inequality and help the poor is not to tax the rich but offer more economic freedom to the poor. So this is one strategy through which we can counter the existing inequalities, because when we have offered more economic freedom to the poor, so they can compete better in the marketplace for a bigger share of the economic pie. So all these factors actually help us reduce the inequalities. So the next important news article is with respect to the new collective quantified goal. Now see, this new collective quantified goal actually talks about the financial assistance to the developing countries or poor developing countries, because see, financial assistance and at the same time the technology transfer are twin tools or elements, so that will be helpful for the poor and underdeveloped countries to undertake adaptation and mitigation efforts. So they will play a very important role with respect to countering climate change. Okay, so setting a new goal for the provision of climate finance, the developing countries poised to be central topic for the 29th Conference of Parties COP29 that will be held under the aegis of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in Azerbaijan across this year. Okay, so this particular platform will provide a crucial platform for the countries to address climate finance and establish new collective quantified goal to guide the financial targets. So in fact, so what is the significance of climate finance? So first and foremost, the climate finance is very important and very essential for promoting the climate action. So because that could support the adaptation and mitigation efforts for the developing countries and small island states and world least developed nations such as island nations, India, South Asian countries, Africa and Latin American countries. So in fact, the climate financing and technology transfer are considered as lifeline for the disadvantaged countries, because they very often lack the financial resources to undertake the adaptation and mitigation measures, and they can also deal with the negative effects of climate change with this climate financing. Okay, so the economic effects of these climatic disasters disproportionately affect the poorer countries and demanding targeted financial support to promote climate justice. Okay, so this new climate quantitative goals creation is extremely important for guaranteeing fair access to funding for climate adaptation and mitigation. Okay, so that's all about today's class, and thank you so much. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. We'll come up with few more important news articles by tomorrow's lecture. Thank you.